Sorry about that, guys. We actually had a bit of a technical issue there. So where were we? So in terms of,
4 years writing a book, and you've done it in a couple of months.
So and I finished it in about 3 months. I think it took me to then finish it, complete it after that. Now, but
just bear in mind that I had one of the first times I prescribed Ritalin was to someone who'd spent a year trying to finish a PhD thesis. And on Ritalin, he finished it in 2 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, they're also known as nootropics. It doesn't mean that anyone who doesn't actually doesn't. You know, there's a level of you can overdose on things. And because I remember one time actually asking if. About taking testosterone shots, and I think it was very big in the 70s and 80s, or, let's have a testosterone shot, and it'll make you more manly. But apparently, if you actually have too much testosterone, or you actually have to input it takes you over the edge, and it actually has a lot of quite significant side effects.
You become aggressive, your hair falls out, your testicles shrink.
Okay, which is not going to make you more confident. So all those things will actually have an effect. So the thing is, it's about getting that balance right, but it's also getting about all those variables as much as you possibly can, working together in harmony. And anxiety in some ways, because we all need to be challenged. We all need to be challenged, because let's face it, when people talk about this world of utopia, for example, and I think we covered this last week. There's a point where you're going to get bored. I mean, if you went on you've had a 2 week vacation, you have a 2 week holiday or vacation abroad. Oh my God, I wish it was a month. Do you know what? Even a month, but even after 3 months, there's a point where you're going to get bored, because you're not being challenged. You're just plateauing, and when you're not growing, you're dying.
You see,
like a plant.
You're absolutely right. Now, because we're tribal, we need our group identity. That's crucial, because we need to function within structure and hierarchy. There's only 2 rules of human behavior. One is anxiety reduction. 2 is structure and hierarchy and sense of belonging. Now, within that structure and hierarchy, we have our own personal identities, and if we understand our own personal identities, we flourish within that structure and hierarchy. If you don't have a structure and hierarchy, you end up with this very sad situation of multiple little mini groups of identitists just saying, well, this is our structure and hierarchy and we have to function within this. No. You need a group identity within which you have individuals flourishing underneath their own characteristics. In other words, you have your tribal identity, and then you have females being females, males being males, more confident people doing more confident things, less confident people doing things which are consistent with being less confident.
But you know what? But you can raise confidence in people. Confidence can be changed. There's a lot of things can be changed. There's a lot of things that can't be changed. But it's interesting, because one thing you could probably, if some major wacky scientist goes future, they'll probably be able to actually do a whole full body scan analysis to find out, goes, your dopamine levels are this level, your testosterone is at this level, your oxytocin is at this level. You need to increase that. So and there'll be probably somewhere way down the future that will be able to find the right balance.
Well, they've done it with politics, and you saw the same clip, didn't you, where Jordan Peterson talked about the fact that conservatives have been shown to have much higher levels of conscientiousness. Whereas
you need to describe what conscientiousness is.
Conscientiousness are people who are very detail and order focused, whereas
structure.
Whereas socialist people on the left are more likely to be much more liberal and less structured.
Yeah. But in terms of
more creative,
he also one of the things he also talks about openness, which means that if you're more open, you're more creative.
Which is what we just said.
Now the thing is, I consider myself a conservative.
But remember, creativity can be good. Creativity can be good, but often it's very, very bad. Because creativity usually ends in disaster. It's only by evolution and natural selection
I've got to say, I think Elon Musk and Richard Branson and Steve Jobs and every person, every techie guy in Silicon Valley who's created some of the most elaborate bits of, lots of, well, the amount of software that they've actually created would probably actually argue that point. There's, creativity is not actually a bad thing. Innovation is not a bad thing. Innovation is what actually makes us grow.
Look at who they are. You've got Elon Musk, who is a very functioning Asperger's, well, very poorly socially functioning Asperger's, who really can't be trusted to tweet anything sensibly, and usually doesn't give lectures because he can't do it. You've got Steve Jobs, who, obviously I never met him, I don't want to be unfair on him, but his daughter describes him as a narcissistic psychopath, and therefore it doesn't look good for these CEOs, and yet these people have the biggest influences on our lives. And have we got happier? Have we got happier with Facebook and things like that?
No. But look, half the innovative things that come out there are never done alone. I mean, everyone thinks, like, for example, Thomas Edison actually, he actually created the light bulb. He didn't. He took someone else's idea and actually made it work. But he made it work in a lab with other people, and spending a lot of hours on it. Yet he was the face of it, and that's what he got recognised for. But he didn't do it alone. Innovation and creativeness can't be done alone. It needs to be done on a collaborative nature. And it's one of the things that Walt Disney used to do. He actually had a team, I think he called it Imagineers, which is he combined people who had imagination and engineers together, and he combined these two people, and he had this 3-room policy, which was one was called the what if room. Come out with any wacky idea. But you weren't allowed to put it down. You weren't allowed to criticize. Then you went in the second room, and it was like, okay, how can we make this work? And they actually find how they could actually make it work. And the third room they went into was the critical room, I think it was. And then that's when they actually started finding holes. And all the ones that managed to go through that 3-stage process are the ideas that came. Because let's face it, who in their right mind would buy a whole load of swampland in Orlando and then turn it into one of the biggest tourist attractions in the world? Bearing in mind, he started buying each acre at about $40. But the thing is, it's not that is not a rational decision to make. Warren Buffett wouldn't make a decision like that because it would be too much of a risk. So creatives need to be able to take that risk. But the thing is, you also need, creatives are dreamers. They sit very high up in the clouds. You need people in your team who are rational in terms of can actually ground you a little bit, but not too much that actually stops the autonomy of what you're able to actually do. So there are benefits, but the thing is, most of the creative ideas out there never work. But the thing is, only one actually needs to be able to stick to be able to get there, and that's why. And that's the direction we're going. We're going towards a more entrepreneurial time market landscape, and people need to adapt to that. And the people who've actually been working in corporate companies for a long, long time don't actually have that. They don't actually have that skill set, or they're very much conditioned of being supported by a large infrastructure of a corporate company.
People have their. We're talking about identity. People have their own characteristics, so some people will be more creative than others, and you can't force people to be that which they're not.
No, but the thing is, it's about adapting to the new marketplace. Now, if we're living in a techie marketplace and you're not a techie, you are going to struggle. I mean, I remember having this conversation with someone probably about 4 years ago, actually, who says, "Oh yeah, my daughter's 9 years old. She wants a mobile phone so she can talk to her friends, and an iPhone, I think it was." And he says, "I don't want to get her one. I don't want to get into the habit of that." But do you know what? And as a father, I actually had to agree with him and what he was coming from. But the other side of me was actually sort of saying, actually, do you know what? He's going to, if a child can't use a mobile phone at the age of 9 and be able to communicate with their people, what's going to happen is that they're going to be left behind, because using a mobile phone or a smartphone and some of the apps on the phone, if you can't, and if you're behind everyone else at your age, it's like being illiterate. in this new era.
That's different. That's using something. That's using technology. It's
but
like
not everyone. Not
proficient.
everyone can write code.
Yeah.
Not everyone. Hold on a second. Not everyone can write code. Not everyone can build a company. So a lot of people who are more people are going to actually struggle. Are going to actually struggle to adapt unless they actually build a strong enough profile and a strong enough niche or a strong enough unique product to be able to stand out in it. Because at the end of the day, you've got to be able to either put something unique out there that no one else can do, or you have to be able to do it better than anybody else. That's the only way you're really going to survive, because otherwise you're going to be like everybody else. And if you're like everybody else, you're going to have to compete on price, either as a worker or as a business owner.
Now you're talking about the rarefied atmosphere of your clients. Most people as a worker. All right, because there was an article in the newspaper the other day saying, "Oh yeah, unemployment's down, but the thing is, people are actually getting paid less." And that's true, because why? Because they're competing on price. The big companies that employ you are now paying you less because they can pay you less because there's more people around. Exactly.
There's more people around.
Demand.
So it's not about my client. It's about the whole way the market is going.
90% of work is a job, and a job is defined as something you wouldn't do unless you're paid to do it.
That's not the point. But people are still going to have a job.
2% are careers, and that's what you're talking about.
No. Think about the 98%.
98%.
Okay, think about the 90%. Bear in mind that bearing in mind that there's more people now in self-employment.
Shop assistants.
There's another,
personal assistants.
But you're not going to pay them more than you have to. Than they have to. Because why? Do you know why? Because they're competing on price. Their value is a price based on how much they're actually earning. It's not because the thing is, oh, do you know what? Actually, I want to work in Tesco's, but you know what? My specialist skill is in Heinz baked beans. It has no value. It's not. It has enough meaning to the company.
And of course, you're right about supply and demand, which is so. There's two big social disasters here. The first is the state not respecting and encouraging the family unit and effectively forcing women to go to work, because if you increase the supply, you devalue the work supply itself.
That is the Western culture, though.
Secondly, is the immigrants, and people saying, well, they contribute economically. Actually, they don't, because what happens is, because the supply is vastly increased, they're all working on minimum wage or less. And the minimum wage is not a living wage, so that means they still need significant state support. So all that's happening is the state is subsidizing cheap labor for these large multinationals. So you have the two disasters are forcing women to work and immigrants, which increase the supply vastly. And if you increase the supply, you devalue it and you get paid less. It really is as simple as that.
Okay, guys. Listen, I think we're going to actually end this conversation here. So a couple of takeaways from this. One is not only to actually, do the best you can with your external characteristics, which are your physical characteristics and your demeanor and your behavior and what you portray outside, but also look what's going on internally as well. So even if you are 50 years old and you may think you actually have ADHD, go get it checked out. If you think you're not producing enough testosterone, go and check it out and see if you can actually find the balance. And there's going to be a little bit of a tweaking process throughout the whole thing until you actually find what's comfortable in. It may mean you just need to go and get a little bit more exercise. It may mean that you actually have to go and take some time out. There's a lot of things that you need, but the thing is, the biggest factor of this is about being self-awareness, not only about who you are mentally, but who you are physically, and who you are even probably organically, I suppose, as well. If you look at the genetically, that's the best way to do it. Okay,
you said that beautifully, self-awareness, because in this society people are living a life doing what they think they need to rather than what they want to. So if we summarize, the personal identity is understanding what you want to do, which comes from self-awareness, absolutely, and there are ways to achieve that, because of course our anxiety robs us of self-awareness, and we'll talk about that more another time. And then the bigger and more important thing is group identity, and without the proper group identity, which the state is not giving us in the West, then we're going to be vulnerable to being subsumed by identities which are not healthy, such as drug cultures, such as identity politics, and the like.
Okay, so actually, one last thing to end, and this is going to be a little bit of a sales pitch here, or a little bit of a plug.